Hi everyone. Welcome to the 9th week of Music for Mindfulness with Alina Orchestra and Arts for Health, Milton Keynes. My name is Anna and I'd like to thank you for joining us today. It's wonderful to think how far we've come with our Music for Mindfulness program, and no matter how many or how few videos you've watched, I want to congratulate you on taking that time to prioritize your mental health and your well-being. I really hope that classical music will continue to be a source of nourishment for you once Music for Mindfulness has come to an end. Now, we have some exciting programmatic music planned for you today, and I thought this would give us a nice opportunity to return to our Music for Mindfulness journals. If you've watched our previous videos, you may have noticed that I recommend watching our videos with a pen and a piece of paper beside you so you can note down anything that you find particularly useful. If this can be one notebook that becomes a Music for Mindfulness journal, so much the better. Now, if you don't have this with you at the moment, don't worry. Just pause the video, go and find something to write with and something to write on, and I'll see you back here in a moment. Lovely. So we're going to begin today by reflecting on Music for Mindfulness thus far. Do you remember elements of the videos that you've watched? Was there a particular piece of music you liked, or an instrument you discovered, or perhaps even a mindfulness tool that you found helpful? If so, take a moment and just jot those down in your journal. This is going to provide us with a little roadmap to come back to in the future. Now, turning to today's music, I'm going to give you one word for each piece, and I'd like you to write that word in big, clear letters at the top of a sheet of paper in your journal. So, the first word is shower. Write that down in big, clear letters at the top of a page. Now, going on to the next page, I'd like you to write the word cave. Now, I'm sure these words are already sparking ideas and thoughts in your mind, but hold fire just for a second. What I'd like you to do is begin to listen to the music we have planned for you today. Then hold these words in mind and start to let yourself write or draw or doodle, whatever speaks to you. You might produce something quite literal, like a drawing of a shower or something to do with water, or it might be something very abstract where it inspires you to sort of write a whole diary entry. There's no pressure and there's no right answer. The idea of today is to let the music inspire your own unique, mindful creativity and just see what you come up with. I really hope you enjoy doing this exercise today, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.
Hello again, and welcome to week 9 of Music for Mindfulness. I hope you have seen some of the others. If not, the previous weeks are all on the website, and you can go through the whole thing from beginning to end, or back to front, or any way you like. But this week we are looking at the concept of water. And there are two different manifestations of water. One of them is this very gentle piece by Elgar, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. And the second one is the famous Mendelssohn Hebrides overture. And they look at the whole business of water from a different sort of angle, even though they have certain things in common, not least the fact they both loved the English and Scottish countryside. Elgar wrote this piece before the First World War. It's very unlike the sort of pomp and circumstance march people often associate with Elgar, sort of imperial grandeur. Elgar was in fact a rather sensitive person, very easily upset, quite sort of tense and twitchy, and his wife was the person who kept him going. She was older than him and much calmer, and devoted herself entirely to him and did him no end of good as a result. And after she died, he really never wrote another major piece again. So the piece is called The Shower, and it's sung by my very own City of London choir, who love this repertoire. And it's a poem by Henry Vaughan, 17th century poem. It starts very quietly with just a nice chord on the word cloud. And then it slowly gets going and moves forward very gently and compares the cloud with its capacity for producing water to his eyes weeping. So that another provision of water on a rather smaller scale, but the parallel between the weeping eye and the cloud raining is obviously one of the sort of features. And the piece comes to an end talking about how he is upset and bound up and asleep. And then the chord which we started cloud on at the very beginning comes again, but in a completely different layout, with the basses very low at the bottom of the chord. Just compare that sound with this is the first chord of the piece, and this is the beginning of the second verse. And just repatterning that chord completely changes what it tries to say. And the music accelerates because he's talking about drops of rain, and you'll hear it going twice as fast because the raindrops come twice as fast. And then after all this slight turbulence and getting rather wet, the piece finishes with a sort of consolation which is extremely beautiful. It moves a little faster and it says, perhaps at last some such showers past and there will be sunshine after rain. And the very end is particularly beautiful because there's this phrase, sunshine. A sunshine, and that's sung first of all by the sopranos and immediately following it by the tenors underneath them singing the same tune a little bit later than they sing it, and it finishes very quietly with the words sunshine after rain, and the chord that it finishes on for rain is the same chord, that very dark chord with very low basses, which begins the second verse on the word cloud. So there's an extraordinary sense of completeness inside this very short, small piece. Elgar explores the concept of nostalgia, perhaps melancholy, but ultimately hopefulness, because after the rain, whether the rain is real rain or it's a metaphor for weeping, there comes sunshine. What could be more appropriate in this particular time after all the turbulence we've all been through? So here it is then, Elgar's lovely piece, The Shower. I hope you enjoyed that and you felt its eventual consolation. Now, the second piece today is longer and will repay several performances. I should listen to it more than once if you don't know it well already. This is Mendelssohn's Hebrides Overture, subtitled Fingal's Cave, which was the place in Scotland, where he went in 1829 on a very extended tour of Scotland, which produced a lot of results in terms of music. He wrote a symphony called the Scottish Symphony, number 3, which is well worth listening to, and I'll put it down as the additional listening. But the Fingal's Cave, Mendelssohn's Hebrides Overture, is even better known, and it's an absolutely wonderful piece of composition. It starts with a sort of restless feeling. I mean, this is the sea sort of not at its most aggressive, but sort of as the sea does, it's sort of just sort of churning underneath. And the tune is this. Which has a marvellous feeling of the sort of slightly always shifting sea. And it's very important that you get that tune in your head because it dominates the piece in various different guises, which we'll have a little look at. The piece was first performed in May 1832 with the composer conducting. It was an instant success and has remained so ever since. So after that first tune I played you, though the piece is descriptive, and it's very much Mendelssohn's impression of what he saw at Fingal's Cave. It's in strictly classical form, so it has 2 tunes, and the second tune is in the major key, the first tune being in the minor key, so it's easy to recognise. And this one is a very gentle tune. Which is the sea at its more serene, or perhaps it's a bird singing. It doesn't really matter exactly what it is, but it indicates the strange shifting nature of the experience. We've all had it at the seaside. Sometimes the sea is very rough and unpleasant, sometimes it's very tranquil and inviting. Both those qualities are present in the music, though it is more the turbulent that makes the bigger impression on Mendelssohn, and I suspect Fingal's Cave is a place where the water is pretty turbulent, though I have never been there myself. So that tune, which is beautiful but quite short, comes to an end, and then you get a version of the tune, the first tune, which is slightly bent. That is obviously derived from the first tune, but not quite identical with it. And he uses that as a sort of accumulating process to get extremely loud and builds up to a very violent climax where the sea is boiling over and the orchestra plays very loud. Well, that comes to a halt with a very big fanfare for trumpets and horns, which you can't fail to notice. And then there's a very fascinating passage where the strings are just kind of hovering over a note, a little bit like this sort of sitting on top of the water, and there are loud outbursts which come perhaps from birds, who can say. On top of this rather gentle rocking pattern underneath. That passage is the sort of middle of the piece, so you can mark it as the middle of the piece, and then we come to an extraordinary moment when the very first tune, instead of being played as single notes on top of some accompaniment, comes as a little group of very tight chords played by the strings. Da. So instead of being a legato, sweet, long melody, it comes as a very tight group of detached notes. And this leads towards the big climax of the piece. This is obviously something happening as the wind gets up, and it gets louder and more impassioned, all based on that very simple pattern which is derived from the very first tune, the very opening. And then it comes to a huge climax, which is extremely exciting and clearly very violent. The timpani are used to represent thunder, possibly, certainly water at its most violent. And then it calms down again, and indeed the music becomes very still. And over this stillness, which is a long and very beautiful chord, The clarinet plays that second, very tranquil melody all by itself, very quietly over a sort of string stillness almost, only just enough sound to be playing at all. And the second clarinet comes in underneath it, almost as though there's a sort of two birds having a little singing duet. It's a magical moment and very beautifully conceived by the composer. And then the music gets agitated again, and this time it gets more agitated than it's been before. And finally, we come to a point where the first tune comes back very loud and very separated. Over rushing strings, the water pouring out in all directions. And this agitation continues almost to the end, but the end is masterly, because instead of being very violent all the way to the very last note, we have some very violent chords, and over those violent chords the clarinet plays very quietly. And the piece just very gently finishes. Precisely why suddenly all this violence is dissipated into this very quiet and gentle ending, I don't know, but it's exactly believable in terms of what the sea can do in its unpredictability, its combination of danger and beauty. So here is Mendelssohn at the height of his powers, enormously stimulated by his tour of Scotland, and I hope you will find this music as compelling as I do, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.